Hey, this is Sailor. Welcome to another episode of Metal, Rock, and Whiskey. Hello! You know, I don't get to say this often, but ladies and gentlemen.
Hey.
How's it going tonight, everybody?
Oh, it's going great.
What's up, Sailor?
Awesome.
We have a guest.
Yes, we do.
You guys. Dear friend of the show and friend of mine. Miss Britt Lightning is back to hang out with us and talk about whiskey and talk about the band and albums of the evening. How you doing, Britt?
I'm great. Great to be with you guys again. Thanks for having me.
We're excited to have you back, and I'm super excited to talk about our subject of the evening. Because you will be able to tell some personal stories, or in-person stories at least, about one of the band members. But first, of course, we'll talk a little bit about whiskey. But before we do that, Matt, I know there are some things you want to say about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I mean, when do we never have? When is there a lack of material to talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
I feel like it's just news all year round now, which pisses me off even more because they don't deserve to have that much.
It is, and it's never good news. It's never good news. No,
it's never good news.
No, but if there's news that happened since the last time we talked about it, I'm not aware of it. So, because I know with Dolly and everything that happened with Dolly,
they inducted her anyway, which I kind of think was fucked because she was like, "No, thank you."
You're going in and you're gonna like it. Huh?
That kind
pretty
of a thing.
Much.
Like,
okay.
Yeah. If they could be any more pieces of shit, there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about like current news. So you guys know that another friend of the show, Dee Snider, not really, but kind of. We're Twitter friends. So a couple years ago, I started I don't know how it happened. I started following him on Twitter and noticed that during the period from 2016 to now, he has been very outspoken politically and very supportive, especially right now, of women's rights and what's going on right now. Very against racism and a lot of the disgusting things that are happening around the world. And there are some other people on Twitter, really not shockingly, I should say. So I guess I'll ask you guys. So there's this group of like, what do I want to say? Like social justice warriors that kind of emerged and became friends, although they are all famous musicians, but because of a lot of their stances they were taking on Twitter and some of the constant like shut up and just play music baloney. So whatever your opinion is, you have the right to voice it, of course, as long as you're not being hateful to others. But just so much of the, shut your mouth, how dare you speak out publicly and be a human being outside of your band kind of situation. And there's a few people that emerged. And so I wonder if you guys know who Dee Snider became friends with in the past year because of his Twitter feuds.
I can't even venture a guess.
I don't know.
So Richard Marx is one of them.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah, we've talked about Richard before.
Yeah, so you guys know he's like my favorite account to follow now. His use of profanity is probably the most impressive shit I have ever read in my entire life. And
he is a writer.
He's a creative writer, let's say. More than lyrically. Just someone I just never would assume, and just goes to show you shouldn't judge a book by their cover, would have never assumed Richard Marx would be someone to his level of, how should I say this? Just the way he uses profanity is probably some of the most amazing shit I've ever seen. So recently him and Dee Snider had the opportunity to meet in person and take a picture together as friends and comrades in the fight of being able to, have free speech and use your profanities on social media, and also voice your own beliefs and opinions and points of view as a human other than as an artist. So
a musical collab would be cool.
Can you imagine? That'd be fucking great. That'd be really fucking great. So yeah, that's enough of the news, I guess. I guess we're still saying, fuck the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Still love you, Dee Snider. Why don't we talk about whiskey?
Hey, I'm always ready to talk about whiskey.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Any excuse to drink on a Monday. I love it.
Rolling.
Well, there's a little teaser into what our subject will be. But, before we do that, what's in your glass, everybody?
Ladies first.
All right. I actually don't have anything that exciting at the moment. I went for Legion that I just had that I wanted to finish because it's almost done. And I have some other bottles I wanted to put up on my bar. But I do like this for like a basic, just, affordable, easy drink. Do you like this one? Have you guys had this?
I haven't had it, but it's very interesting. I've heard about that. Isn't that was that one of Freddie No's project? I think
so, yeah. But
Mhm.
I had it when it was first released, but I don't really remember too much about it. I remember liking it though.
It's good.
Really
It's
good
really
stuff,
good.
yeah.
I actually had it at a bar up the street here for the first time, and I was like, "Well, we'll try it." And then I was like, "Oh, I would buy that." It's an easy, really smooth finish. But I did want to mention one whiskey that I had somewhat recently at a bar in the Ozarks when I was playing.
Oh.
And it was a cigar bourbon bar, and I guess this is only available in Kentucky to buy. Like they don't sell it anywhere else. You actually have to go there and get it. And it is called Lux Row. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Oh yeah, Lux Row. That they've got a huge distillery.
Yeah, I tried.
Kentucky.
I don't know which one this was. I took a picture of it, but it's pretty blurry because I drank a lot of it. But it was it was really good. But that was my first time trying that. And they did.
Lux Row is really good.
Yeah. So
Yeah, they make lots of good whiskeys for sure.
I don't have
Yeah,
that one for the Legion.
That Legion is it's Fredno and Shinji Fuko. So they're marrying the styles of a traditional bourbon and Japanese whiskey, and it's aged in sherry casks, I believe.
Yes, that's what this one is. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that sounds amazing.
Tasted it a long time ago at like a big whiskey it can't be that long ago. Anyway, some time ago, and I should go back to it. So
It's
thanks for
nice.
the reminder.
Yeah, I really like it. It's a good one. Cheers.
What's the proof on that? Do you know?
94.
94. Okay.
Yep.
Not too crazy, but still it's got a little bit of heat to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Awesome. Well, I am going to give a shout out to our Australian brothers, in specific, Adrian. He sent me a lot of samples a long time ago, and I don't remember something kept happening every time I was going to taste them. I probably got sick a million times. I don't know. And so I finally I pulled them all out, went back to his notes, because some were labeled and some just say 1, 2, and 3. And I'm like, oh shit, did I do that? Because that's something I totally do. As a matter of fact, Britt, that whole lineup I sent you,
Yeah.
I don't think I ever told you what any of it was.
No, that's why I'm like, and I still
Just
have them.
numbered.
I'm waiting to taste them. I would have had one tonight, but I was like, well, I can't talk about this. I have no idea what it is.
All right, let's me and you do that for the YouTube channel one time. We'll just go through and taste them all. Oh my god,
I love it. I can't believe I haven't even cheated. I haven't even gone into them.
that's impressive.
I
That's
know.
a real blind
That is
tasting.
a real blind tasting. Oh shit. Well, luckily this one was labeled, so I could grab this one really quick. So this is a malt rye whiskey from Australia. It's from Sydney in specific, from Archie Rose Distilling Company. And it won the world's best rye whiskey at the World Whiskey Awards in 2020. So good job there, fellas. This is a 46%. And I'll tell you, when I first pulled it out of the tasting bottle, I was like, whoa, what is this nose? It was really, really tough. And I put it in a big open glass. So I just let it sit there for a while and kind of hang out and chill out. And then I split it so that I could add water, a little bit of water to one glass, and then just leave the other neat. And it got really interesting when it opened up. I don't know that I've ever had a nose like this before. So my notes, I said sweet chocolate nose, which I don't even know what I mean by that. But I remember just kind of like when you walk into, if you've walked into a place that makes chocolate and it's like really hot in there and you can smell the chocolate. That's kind of like what I was smelling. And then you get baked biscuits and rye crackers together. So there's like this sweet smell going on. And then there's like this spiciness that I couldn't really put my fingers on. And so, I went back to the nose several times after tasting it. So it's not like a pure nosing. So the first couple sips was just, the first thing I wrote down was very heavenly savory flavors. So I got savory right away. It's a little bit bitey on the front, but then it calmed down like mid palate, and all of a sudden, kind of like when I poured it in the glass, it just started to open up on my palate. So I got juicy stone fruits and raisins. And even though I said juicy stone fruit, because it's really that difference in smell, it's still a dry whiskey, which, you expect from rye. And then the spice came right back. And it kind of goes like similar to the nose, like sweet, spicy. And so it's just layers and layers. It's very, very complex. Then I got molasses and dark chocolate, ginger and baking spices. And then right at the end of the finish, I got this bitterness that came in, and I almost thought, ooh, this is really bitter. But then I started to salivate and the sweetness came back. So it's just really, really interesting. If you can find a bottle, I don't know what their distribution is like, I would highly recommend it. I was just really impressed with this. It's very interesting. I can see why it would win a top award. It's very unique. It's unlike any other rye I've ever tasted, for sure.
What did you say it was called one more time?
Archie Rose Rye Malt.
That's right.
I mean, you had me all the way back at biscuits. All the other stuff is just a plus. That's awesome.
I love biscuits.
Yeah.
Baked biscuits is not a common tasting note of mine, I'll tell you.
That's why you had me at it. That's
at all.
Very unique.
Nor is juicy stone fruit, for that matter. I usually get dried stone fruits, like in a Scottish single malt or an Irish single malt. I always get that like fruit basket, but it's always dried fruit. This was definitely juicy fruit, which was really confusing me because it's a very dry rye whiskey. But as I'm talking now, I just took a sip. Now you salivate like at the end of the sip, which is so weird because it should be dry. So I don't know. It's I hate to use the pun, but it kind of turned the world upside down. From Australia.
They make some interesting whiskeys, that's for sure.
They certainly do. So I read that it's aged in American oak, but they season their oak and they season it in the open air. So I think that's where it's interesting because I don't get any brine or salinity, but I think that's where some of that cracker comes from. That might be how I'm reading that, ocean air, that salinity in the air. So those are my notes. So thank you again, Adrian, so much. I appreciate being able to taste such an interesting and beautiful whiskey.
Yeah, also another one of our Australian friends, Vic, happened to send me this T-shirt.
Oh yeah,
The
Wild River.
Wild River Distillery.
Remember talking about that?
Yeah, he said he did try to send me a bottle, but customs returned it to him.
Bastards.
So,
How dare
so he did.
they?
He did manage to get me a T-shirt and some Tim Tams. But he
There you
says,
It's a good
Tim
consolation
Tams.
prize.
we'll try again in the future.
Where the hell
I
are
guess.
my Tim Tams? I forgot my damn Tim Tams. Shit. I froze some. The last batch Adrian sent me, I froze them. Do you know what these are, Britt? Tim Tams?
No.
Oh my god. Okay.
Oh,
Pause. I'm gonna go get some. Hold on.
deliciousness! It's like the official Australian cookie.
Oh, okay. I still haven't been to Australia. That's like one of the ones left on the list. So.
I've only heard about these. I've never tasted them myself, so I'm just taking their word for it.
Okay.
Yeah, and Vic's and Adrian's.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Try to imagine two rectangular, like maybe like shortbread crackers, something like that, sandwiched with like chocolate in the middle and then chocolate covered.
Okay, so there's really nothing like it's.
I really
this
can't
side of the
compare it to
globe.
anything we have in the
Yeah.
States.
They
Okay.
have tons. He sent me a picture. Like when he was buying them for me one day, and we're on Instagram, and he's sending me pictures like, "What flavor do you want?" I'm like, "I don't know what my choices are." My favorite is the salted double chocolate.
Wow.
So I
So
think
it's like a biscuit. Oh, but Britt, you have to go on YouTube and you have to look at the Tim Tam challenge, and I promise we'll do it one day. And when you're back home, we'll do it.
Okay.
So they're so freaking delicious.
yeah, it's like the Australians. Not that they're comparable as a cookie, but as their popularity. The way Oreos are popular over here, that's kind of
Yeah.
the way Tim Tams are. They have all the different flavors and stuff. But anyway.
Oh my god, they're so
Wow.
good.
I will
They're
have
really
to-
good with whiskey.
I can see that. I can see
yeah.
that.
I believe
They're
that.
really good with whiskey. Mm. Fuck yeah. All right, guys, what about you? What do you guys
All
have
right.
in your glass?
Go ahead.
All right. I'm drinking something a little more local here, actually, as in just a few miles away from where I sit. So I got this, it's called Still 630 Rally Point Straight Rye Whiskey from Still 360 in St. Louis. I attempted to visit the distillery today, but unfortunately they were closed. I stopped by and talked to the guy there for a couple minutes. He invited me to come back on the weekend, but unfortunately I will not be here then. But I stopped by the local liquor store here and found this, and it's a 90 proof. And this is anything more I can really say about it. It's 90% rye and 10% barley. So, and it doesn't have an age statement on it, but it is straight. So, we're at least 2 years in there. So, but at first I opened it up and I wasn't too sure about it. And Sailor, I think it's like you were saying about the other one. You just got to give it some time to kind of air out a little bit and open up. But this is really growing on me. The nose is it's very sweet on the nose, very caramely on the nose. But when you taste it, it gets a little more savory. Like it's still got a little bit of caramel note, but it really comes in with like a nuttiness, like a toasted pecan in there, which is really nice. And you still can taste some of those oak notes in there too. So yeah, I'm kind of a fan. It's not bad.
It's kind of awesome now that you can travel around the country and find like really quality whiskey now.
Yes.
That so many of the distilleries, that's why I keep telling people, you've got to support your local hometown distillery. If you don't like what they have on offer right now, keep going back. Go back every year and check on them again. taste again. Give them time. It's really a difficult business. Give them time to develop, to learn their processes, to really hone their products, and they need time to age. And I mean, I think it's getting more and more common for people to also have a bottle of their local whiskey on the shelf as well, which I'm so happy to see. And Matt, I think we're finally getting more distilleries in our state as well. There's like 10 new distilleries that have been announced in the past like couple months in the news, so that's exciting.
Yes, it is.
Florida's
Very
been
cool.
very behind the times in that respect.
For distilleries, yeah. I mean, they've always been sort of near the forefront as as far as beer goes, but they are starting to sort of close the gap with distilleries. So
Mhm.
it's good to see that.
Yeah.
Yep.
What are you drinking tonight, Matt?
Well, what I'm drinking actually has been in the news lately. If you have seen that they found Ernest Shackleton's ship in Antarctica recently on an expedition.
You did.
Anybody know the story of Shackleton? No?
I do
Okay,
not.
I'm not going to get into the weeds on it because it is a long story, but it's a fantastic story. So if you have time to look it up and read about Ernest Shackleton and just his life and this particular journey he took to Antarctica on, I guess it was just an expedition to map the land or something like that. And long story short, he brought some whiskey with him. It was lost, and in 2007, some archaeologists or something found the whiskey, and White and McKay, which is a whiskey producing company, actually was able to acquire some samples of it and reproduce it, or try to reproduce the whiskey that had been found that had been in the ice for 100 years. So Shackleton, was what I'm drinking right now, is sort of the brainchild of White and McKay and Richard Patterson, who blended this. This is a blended malt. It's not a single malt. And tried to duplicate the taste of that original whiskey that was taken out of the ice that had been there for over 100 years. So the reason why that was in the news is that they actually found the original ship that Shackleton had sailed to Antarctica on after being in the ice since 1907. So fantastic story. The guy is an amazing human. Everything that he had been through at that time, and being able to survive after being stranded in Antarctica basically for months with his crew, and nobody died. So it's an amazing story of survival. And then we get this great whiskey from it. But this whiskey is pretty unique for me, at least for the style wise. Blended malt is kind of a happy purgatory between blended Scotch and single malt Scotch. Basically, it's a blend of single malts without that grain whiskey base. Grain whiskey is pretty cheap to use, and a lot of your blends use that, your Johnny Walkers, your Dwarves. But this is just a blend of single malts from different Speyside distilleries. And it's very unique because the main tasting notes that I get on this are actually brown sugar and cinnamon, which to me, when I think of brown sugar and cinnamon, I think American whiskey. I don't necessarily think of Scotch whiskey. So that's the prevalent flavor profile. And then with any great blended malt, there's always that little smoky backbone on the end. So you get that little bit of, peat smoke on the back end, which is just a telltale sign of a great blended malt. And of course, Richard Patterson's one of the best in the biz, and he hits another home run with this one. It's been around for a little while. It's my first time tasting it, and really, really enjoying it. So it's been my everyday sipper recently.
That is so interesting. I've been wondering if it was going to be just, I'll tell you, when I first read about it, I didn't know it was Richard Patterson, or I would have just been like, done, I'm buying it, I'm drinking it.
Absolutely.
He's just like, can do no wrong. But I went, it's really gimmicky,
Well, that was the only reason I bought it, because I knew he was behind it. And because I'm not big on the gimmicks, you know that.
Yeah, no.
At least in whiskey anyway.
It kind of reminds me.
In wrestling, I am, but not in whiskey.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I kind of how I felt when Metallica announced they were announcing their whiskey.
Oh yeah, we shit
but
all
then
over
I found out that Dave Pickerel was behind it.
Yeah,
Like, okay,
exactly.
I'm in.
Oh yeah, we crapped. If we go back to the episodes when that was announced before they released the first bottle, we shit all over it. And then we found out it was Pickerel, and we were like, okay, let me amend my statement.
If you can get a name behind your whiskey, it doesn't matter how gimmicky it is.
Yeah.
If you have that name that can draw the real whiskey enthusiast to your product, that's it.
But it's got to be good in the bottle too.
Well, of
otherwise
course.
that'd
I
be
mean,
the end of it.
that
Yeah.
goes without saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if the person behind it, certain people like Dave Pickerel will not put out crap. You know that.
Yeah, if they have the
So that's
pedigree
what-
and the resume, yeah,
Yeah, as long as they're really in charge, though.
of
You know.
course.
All right. Well,
All right.
that was fun.
stuff.
I'm going to take another sip of my whiskey, and then we're going to get into a very fun discussion about, I guess, you guys, are we returning to our hair metal series?
Yes.
Are we? Are we finally returning to our hair metal?
Depends
series?
on if you consider them hair metal.
Oh, we're gonna talk about that, Matt.
hell
We're gonna
yeah.
talk about that.
With a capital H.
Outside my window, there's a whole lot of trouble coming. The cartoon killers and the rank overgrows. Stack eagles kicking a rhythm of social circumcision. I can't close the closet on a shoebox full of bones.
All right, so tonight we're gonna talk about Skid Row, and of course we're gonna end up talking about Britt's friend Sebastian Bach a bit, because how do you talk about the band without talking about, oh boy, definitely one of the most popular, or should I say most famous singers, rock singers from the 80s. And definitely in the camp of a colorful personality, shall we say. And I would like to say that he grew out of it as he got older. But I do remember, I don't know if you guys watched what the heck was it called where they all lived in the house? Remember what was that show
Yes.
called? It was on MTV or VH1. Why can't I think?
I know what you're
It'll come
talking
to me.
about.
But I remember he was on with, it's going to be one of these nights where it's going to be a lot of what's his face. I don't know what's wrong with my brain. What's his face from Anthrax was on the same one with Sebastian Bach. And that's where he ended up meeting his wife, not Sebastian Bach. What's his face from Anthrax?
Scott Ian?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
And I remember watching it going, oh, he didn't grow out of his shenanigans. But then he was on TV. So I don't know. But we'll get into that. Let's just start off with the basics in case you live under a rock and you don't know what the fuck we're talking about. The band Skid Row, not the street or area in LA, was formed in 1986 in Toms River, New Jersey. And Sebastian Bach was recruited to be the lead singer at 18 years of age. He was a young feller. And does anybody know the ties between Bon Jovi and Skid Row?
Bon Jovi and Skid Row.
Didn't Bon Jovi suggest Sebastian to the other guys in the band to be their singer?
Yes. So
Something like that. Yeah.
Dave Sabo, the guitarist for Skid Row, was very, very good friends with John Bon Jovi. They grew up together. And so I guess Sebastian was singing at a wedding, a famous rock photographer's wedding. And everybody was like, oh, yeah, this guy. And so they introduced him and he said, yes, of course. And they became Skid Row. But that story mingles for a long time. And then there's controversy, and we'll talk about that later. But apparently there's a legend out there that either management or the recording company, not sure, had to pay $35,000 to purchase the name Skid Row from an Irish band who had already published under the name Skid Row. So, you know. All right. So we're going to talk about two of Skid Row's albums, and let's start with their debut album, Skid Row. I think that's their most popular album, but we'll get into that. It was released in January of 1989, and Michael Wagener produced the album. I never knew, like, I know a lot about this guy because he's worked with everybody, but he was the original guitarist for the band Accept, which I never knew. So he also produced the first Dokken album, and he was the one who mixed Master of Puppets.
And also
that I did not know.
And Vixen. I was just going to say.
There you go.
Nice.
Yes. And Janet Jackson and Ozzy Osbourne and Motley Crue and Poison and Keel and Overkill and Wasp and Great Way. A lot goes on and on.
Quite
and
the
on
resume.
And on. He has had an incredible resume. What I found interesting is if you ever want to go down a really cool rabbit hole, look him up online and read about his comments as to why he thinks he was a successful producer. And he talks a lot about psychology. And I found that to be really, really interesting, talking about the psychology of it and having to, be in a certain place and get the musicians in a certain place to get what you want out of them, or to find out what it is that they want and what they think their sound is, or what you think their sound should be. Really interesting to go down that rabbit hole. So they released their first album, and they're touring with Bon Jovi, of course, and Aerosmith as opening acts. And I find this to be, I think this is proof of what a tiny little world it was back in '89, because their album peaked at number 6 on the Billboard 200. Okay. It was certified 5 times platinum just about 5 years later. And they're playing as an opening act. Their album peaked at number 6, especially at that time for hard music.
I saw them open for Van Halen. And it must have been around, it was when Van Halen was touring for their Balance album.
That's amazing.
That was, yeah. All I can tell you is, Sebastian Bach's stage presence is like, you could be 500 feet away and you feel like he was there in your face.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he was amazing.
Tall and really loud.
Yes.
So Britt, you had the opportunity to hang out with Mr. Bach recently.
I did. Yes, I love that guy. He is amazing. I mean, not only, as you mentioned, is he an incredible singer, but frontman. And we actually, with Vixen, we play some shows with him too. And I remember just one, example of how he's just, the show must go on and everything. We were having the fires up in California here, and his house was like in the evacuation zone, and he had just gotten off the phone with his wife and his family, and they're like having to move stuff out, and it was so stressful. And then he gets on stage right after he hangs up the phone and just brings it. I mean, there's no, just such a pro, just such a performer.
Wow.
Yeah, he's amazing.
There's this really great shot that you put on your Instagram, and I made a comment on it, and I knew you were laughing when I made the shot. I was cracking up. So there's a bunch of you on stage because it's at the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, and there's a row of people. The only person's hair who is blowing in the breeze, like there's a fan directed just at him, is Sebastian. And so I said, so his hair just is always blowing in the breeze naturally. Yes.
Yes, because he looks that way in every picture. Unless it's some post, editing app that you can just go like that.
Blow someone's hair back.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
But he is awesome. And, and actually when we performed the final show with him at that camp, it was his birthday, and we did it in Vegas where he's living now. And so it was a total party. And, usually we have like a set jam list at the end of the night. And he was just, it was even way cooler than it normally is, because he was like, screw the list. This is my birthday. I want to play this song with this person. And Vinny Appice was on drums. He was like, it's just calling out Sabbath songs. And it was just almost like being in his living room with him, just hanging out and partying, and
That's
there was
so
no
cool.
script, and it was so much fun. He even got his kids up on stage to play with us. It was fun.
Oh, that sounds like a blast. That sounds like he sounds like he and seems like he'd be a very fun person. And again, you know, depending on what he's like in front of the camera and behind the camera, as long as you can relax a little bit for a little while in between the energy. He seems
Yeah,
like he has
a
a
lot of
lot of
energy.
energy,
Yeah, it's amazing. He sure is.
especially at his age now. He's got to be in his, what is he, in his mid-50s now? He's got to be.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, I'm almost 50, so he's got to be. Yeah. Well, hats off to him. I don't have that much energy. Jesus. Or fans off to him.
Yeah, he's 54.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah,
I knew
that
it. He
makes
was a
sense.
couple years older than me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this first album, that was their debut, generated 4 singles, and all 4 singles are some of their biggest hits. Youth Gone Wild, 18 in Life, I Remember You, and Piece of Me. Also, only Ed and I will remember, super, super heavy MTV rotation. Like, you could not get away from this band on the radio and on MTV.
I was just about to say that's how I first discovered Skid Row. I think it must have been on Hairbanger's Ball in the evening.
Probably.
Yes, and it was 89. So yeah, that would have been my sophomore year of college. I was still living at home, going to school, and that came on, and it was which one was it? I think it was 18 in Life, and I was like, whoa, who is this band? This is amazing. This guy's voice is just like nothing I've ever heard before. And that I was hooked from there. And I think I just went out probably the next day and got that album, or ordered it from my music club or whatever it was at the time, and I still got it today. And I've listened to that album, probably hundreds of times, if not thousands.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a really big deal back then. I mean, again, we often have this problem on the show because it's difficult to make people understand the lack of hard music that you had on the radio and on TV and that was accessible. And frankly, it's 1989. We don't have 100 metal bands at the time that are, accessible to us. So they sounded like a very heavy band then. And same when I first heard them, which was probably the same thing, Ed, on Headbangers Ball. I watched it religiously. And then I'd have to have my pen and paper to write down so you didn't forget. That's how I discovered Soundgarden, and you always had to write it down. Okay, it was great for marketing and sales. Jesus.
Either that or press record on your VHS.
Yeah, true. So I just remember, same thing, his voice, like, being like, holy shit, this guy's voice. So, so what do you guys think, Britt and Matt, about this album?
One of my favorite albums ever. I mean, definitely, I think it is their best album. Love the whole album. There's not one like weak song on it. You never have to skip a track. I mean, I think it's one of the best albums. Skid Row is one of my favorite bands ever. I mean, they just are still, So, yeah, I love it. I mean, I think there's just big hooks, there's big grooves. It's heavy, but it's groovy. It's not like, and vocally, it would be heavier if the vocals were like that Cookie Monster stuff, and that's like the worst. Like, I love Sebastian's voice. He can sing along, like, because the music could be heavy, but it almost can be poppy too because of the big hooks that you can sing along to. And of course, the guitars are amazing. Scotty Hill and Snake are two of my favorite guitar players, and they work together so well. But there's definitely like a formula, in each song. It's like, they're formulated to sound like hits, but it worked because they were hits.
Oh yeah, without his voice, can you imagine? I mean, that's not a diss to the musicians at all. But sometimes there just is that one last element, right, that just makes them superpowers.
You bring up a great point, Sailor. And I was thinking about that when I was listening to both these albums, preparing for the show. I was like, really? The band is solid. I'm not going to take anything away from the band. But the only thing that really makes them stand out from the crowd is Sebastian Bach's vocals. I mean, because there are a lot of bands out there.
I don't know if I agree
That's
with
my
that.
opinion.
Well, and the writing though, because I think it has a lot to
The
do with the
writing,
writing.
too.
You're only as
Yeah.
good as your song is too, really. If you can't stand the song, who cares if the vocalist shreds, you know?
Yeah, I mean, lyrically, I mean, if you just think of 18 in Life, I mean, all of their
yeah.
songs are super poetic, very clever, but also like the musicality of the band. I think I would disagree. I think they would have still become a very, very popular, long-lasting, well-known band from the 80s. I just don't think they would have achieved the super status without Sebastian. But I definitely think they would have still been very successful. But his voice was definitely elevated them to super status, in my opinion.
And I think at that time too, you had to have a little bit of shock value. Like, you know, you had people like Poison dressing like women. You had Motley Crue that was kind of, you know, extreme and like real bad boy gang and, you know, Kiss and all things like that. So you had to have something a little crazy to attract the attention.
Mhm.
Sebastian was definitely that for that band.
Yeah.
Well, and not to mention he was very pretty to look at, and that definitely helped. I remember every chick I knew, and even the dudes would be like, "Damn, man, I gotta give it to him. He's a handsome guy."
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
That hair and
That doesn't hurt.
how about you, Matt?
Well, as you guys know from past episodes about bands of similar ilk, if I should say that, I have a tendency to be a little overcritical sometimes. I think it's a byproduct of what we do on this show, but it's also just the habits of how I listen to music too. But I will say that when I listen to an album, and this is my first time listening to this album, by the way, from front to back. I've heard
Wow.
the hits, obviously, but the entire album, first time. So newbie here. But when I can forget about all of the critical stuff and I can really get into the music and enjoy it and get into the flow of how an album is laid out and the grooves and all of the great technical words that Britt used, all of that great stuff, being a musician herself, it's fantastic. It's awesome. It's a lot of fun. I will second everything that everyone said about Sebastian, but I will add one thing to the mix that I think gets overlooked a little bit, and that is New Jersey. They're from New Jersey, and I think that that there is a certain extra edginess to bands like this that come out of New Jersey that get compared to bands that come out of California. And I think that they want to separate themselves from those other bands that came out of California or the glam scene or the hair metal scene or whatever subgenre you want to use for those other bands that we've talked about on the show. And I think Sebastian gives them that. And I think that they have a groove and a sound that separates them from all of their other contemporaries. And I think that New Jersey factor, sort of that outsider factor, gives them that as well. And that's what I love about it. This album's fantastic.
It's interesting you bring that up, Matt, because at first I was going to disagree with you because I don't know if I was thinking of it in like a economical context, but I think I know what you're saying. I think I'm going to agree now. I think there was just a stripped down, more raw sense coming from bands in the Northeast at the time, as opposed
Correct.
to your California bands. And me being going to say that about your San Francisco, your Bay Area bands, there is still something a little bit more raw when you come out of the Northeast. I think it felt more raw in the world at the time as well, strangely. So I think I get that. I think that is another like spice in the mix of the sauce. That super sauce that makes that band is that not only did they had the pretty front man, just like Bon Jovi, but that wasn't what they were relying on. And they could still be that like beer drinking, smash your can against your head, working class, blue collar, fuck yeah, rock music.
Correct.
Bands.
And I think that's what separates them. There's a lot of, you read periodicals and there's a lot of comparisons to them and Bon Jovi because of their history and because of where they came from. But to me, I don't see any real parallels between the two bands. You know what I'm saying? Because I think that beer smashing, beer chugging thing, I think that's more Skid Row, more Bad Boy than Bon Jovi. And we've talked about Bon Jovi before on the show. I won't say
Bon
anything else.
Jovi is definitely a little more polished.
Yeah.
And not as rough around the edges.
Correct.
But they're more
to their advantage, though. I think it's a good thing. It's a good rough around the edges. Yeah,
but they're more stripped down than like a Motley Crue, I think, in my opinion. Motley Crue had, they developed a persona and they created this, like you said, Britt, like this gang, like, we're this like LA street gang, but with makeup on, I think that's definitely, I think especially in the 80s, Jersey rock music, there was definitely a time, it was definitely a place. I think without that, again, that may have just been another element that they would have had a very different sound had they come out of somewhere else. I think you're absolutely right, Matt. I think that's a really interesting perspective.
And I think the scene was in LA, so they really had something to prove. So they had to bring it,
Definitely. Oh yeah, I mean, bands from the Northeast, they all got overlooked. It was your LA bands, it was your San Francisco bands. Everybody else for the most part was being overlooked. They had to fight so much harder. I mean, we talked about Dee Snider, Twisted Sister. It blows my fucking mind when you look at how short-lived they were as a recorded band and how hard they had to fight and how long they had to wait. Like, are you fucking kidding me? They made rock anthems and look how much harder they had to fight. And sorry to say, I think some of the Northeast bands were better musicians and just better bands than some of these LA bands that have lasted through time. I think a lot of it is nostalgia as opposed to maybe like pure talent.
I mean, if you go to the thrash scene, I mean, Overkill is one of my favorite bands of all time, and they were out of New Jersey, and they are right up there talent-wise with any of the big four that came out of California. And they're still doing the same thing 40, 45 years later. So still making albums. So.
Well, we have one more album to talk about, and then we're going to have to make a decision, my friends, on what album we're going to consider to be superior, or at least the winner of this week. So, next up, we're going to talk about Slave to the Grind, which was released by Skid Row June 11th, 1991. And, all right, let's start with some controversy. Matt, get ready. Steel yourself. Be prepared. Slave to the Grind is considered the first heavy metal album to chart at #1 on the Billboard 200, selling 134,000 copies in its opening week. The album was later certified 2 times platinum in 1998 for shipping 2 million copies in the U.S. What do you think, Matt?
When was it released? 91?
1991.
Didn't the Black Album debut at #1 in 91? Did this come out before that?
I don't think it debuted at #1, did it?
Oh, it didn't? I don't know. I thought it did. I don't know. But this came out before it anyway, by 2 months.
Yeah.
So this came out in June. Black Album came out in August.
Maybe I'm wrong, but...
Wow.
Well, that would still put it at first if it came out a couple months before.
True. Very true. Yep.
Yeah. So, Matt... Just so you know, Britt, we have a history of Matt having a problem with bands that were considered heavy metal at the time versus what you would consider heavy metal now.
Uh-huh. I understand that.
All right, so
Yeah,
let's.
I mean, it's 91. It's not like 81, so I don't understand. You know what I'm saying?
I'm telling you that term was used for a long time. We didn't have the subgenres. Just like rock, you had blues that was rock. You had, I mean, rock and roll was fucking everything that wasn't country and chorus music or something.
So in 91, not to get in a rabbit hole here, obviously, but in 91 was grunge or no?
No, not
So
yet.
that term came later.
Later, yeah.
Later,
That
okay,
was
okay.
That was that 93?
That started about the time that Nirvana hit the scene, I think.
Yeah, which I think was
91.
It was 91.
Okay.
No, I don't know.
The point
It all
is that
kinda
you
started
weren't
that
putting that
same
music
time.
into its own category, right? That was just rock music.
I mean, it wasn't me, but it was what.
Not you, but
But category. I mean, you kind of called everything that was like harder than, I don't even know what to say. Like what we
Anything
could
harder than Van Halen at the time was probably metal.
But
That's
Van
the way I
Halen was
remember
considered metal.
it.
Oh yeah, they
I
were
consider
called
it hard
metal.
rock.
I do
Really?
too, but they were absolutely in the metal category at the time.
Hmm.
Definitely.
Okay.
I think people thought long hair was metal.
Agree. I was just gonna
That's
say, I think
fair.
we had long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To do with
Yeah.
the look. I think
Yeah.
it's some, people hear with their eyes, and it's like, I don't know, mom saw, Skid Row, and they were like, oh, metal, don't listen. I don't want my kids listening. To
Yes.
them, yeah.
Come on, Tipper.
Yeah.
Tipper Gore's like, I'm slapping a label on that shit.
Right.
Oh, the good old days of Satanic Panic.
Oh God. That's such a great name for a band, Satanic Panic. And I would call my first album Tipper Gore and get sued blind, probably. Maybe if I called it Tipper Gourd. Ooh, even worse. All right, so we have Wagoner again on this album. This is a much heavier sound. And now there are critics, get ready again, Matt, that have said this was almost speed metal on some of the songs. Now, that's one I'm going to say, what the fuck are you talking about?
What is almost speed metal?
I
don't
don't know.
understand.
I don't know.
Almost, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You're about 5 miles per hour too slow.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's think about it this way. Before Metallica, heavy metal was what?
Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath, and what else?
Judas Priest.
Yeah, I guess.
Deep Purple.
Yeah, Deep Purple. That was heavy metal. So then Metallica comes along, and they're like, "Oh, speed metal." But now, I would ask you, listen to speed metal now, and listen to Metallica. And I wouldn't even put them in
not
that
current Metallica.
Well, of course not current Metallica, but so I think we just have to stick with what it was considered at the time that it came out. I mean,
I got your point.
Also, it takes a long time for entities to change their categories. The fact that there was a fucking heavy metal, like they even had a category for a heavy metal album to chart, I think was a big fucking deal in 1991. I mean, how long did it take for like the Grammys to even acknowledge the heavy metal category? So I think that has a lot to do with it as well. But yeah, Britt, I agree with you. Long hair, playing rock music, it's metal.
Yeah, I mean, this album's definitely heavier. It's definitely heavier, and it seems like it feels more like serious and less like, woohoo, Youth Gone Wild, and even the ballads are less like, they're a little darker. It's getting a little darker. It's getting towards grunge a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. This got a lot of really good critical reception, which I'm surprised. They said that they thought the band had matured a bit. They thought that, they kind of it looked like it was hit or miss, right? So either the critics were like, this is a dud, why didn't they make another Skid Row? This is too serious. And then others are like, no, this is good. They've matured. It's not this, like, they're not going, like, embracing this glam sound that's kind of over now, which I would agree with. But I think it was really interesting because I read a lot of things about the label was trying to get them to like have like half naked chick on on the cover of the album, and like hot chicks on cars, in a bathing suit crawling on cars and whatever in their videos. They were like, no, fuck you, this isn't about that shit, this is about the real world, man, we're trying to say something, man.
Yeah.
Which
it's
now it's kind of
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. This kind of mirrors what I've seen with some other bands around that time. It's a pattern where they hit the scene, they're very popular, they have like the party songs, the anthems, and then as time goes on, they start to really get, I don't know if they're becoming more serious musicians or what it is, but they start to get a little more introspective, a little more start writing about more serious subject matter. Poison is a great example of this, because you could see, like, after the look what the cat dragged in, open up and say, then Flesh and Blood comes along in 1990, and there is still some upbeat fun songs on that album, but you get it's like songs like The Valley of Lost Souls. What else was on there? Poor Boy Blues, Something to Believe in. And they're starting to get into a little more serious subject matter. And then after, that's just an example of, just to say that Skid Row is not the only band who this has happened to before. But this album was fairly new to me. I don't think I've ever listened to this, heard any of these songs on here before, aside from Wasted Time.
Really? Wow.
Surprisingly enough, because I guess I was just so focused on their original album, and then all the other bands that I listened to at the time, that when this came out, I just kind of overlooked it. So this was a very interesting listen for me. The first time through, I wasn't really sure how I felt about it. I was really hooked by Monkey Business and Slave to the Grind right off the bat, like I'm sure any metalhead or rock fan would be listening to this album. And everything after that, it took me a few more listens, and I finally warmed up to it, and I really started to enjoy some of these other songs, like The Threat, Quicksand Jesus, Psycho Love, that for those first several songs in the list. I still kind of like, it kind of falls off a little bit towards the end, right before Wasted Time. Wasted Time was a freaking fantastic song. But yeah, Riot Act almost seems a little bit punkish to me.
That was Sebastian Bach. That's what he came from, was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Rachel too. Rachel's very.
Yes.
Yeah. But overall, I think it's like I said, the more I listen to it, the more I'm into it. I still don't think I hold it in as quite as high as esteem as the original Skid Row album, but it is a good album. I'll give it that.
I think it's a really good album. It's definitely not, the self-titled album, but if you can separate, I think it's hard to separate the two albums back to back from each other. If there was another album in between, that could give you just like that bridge a little bit, like, okay, our style is changing.
I love that you said that.
I think that's what makes it a lot more difficult. So I'm surprised it did as well as it did. But it's I think people bought it and probably were at first like, oh, this isn't like Skid Row, but oh wow, this is a great album, because I think it's a fantastic album. And funny story, real quick, they started recording this album in late 1990 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, about a 10-minute drive from my grandparents' house. And I was down visiting and had a friend whose boyfriend was a bouncer at this is back when the Strip in Fort Lauderdale was the fucking Strip. And, every club had a hotel on top of it and whatever, I can't remember which bar or club it was. Skid Row is staying here and they're having a party tonight in like the whatever room, And she goes, "Oh, do you want to go?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah, I want to go." so I wasn't of drinking age yet. No matter, I had my trusty fake ID. That I ironed, opened it up, changed the ironed it back in the day when you could do that.
No holograms back then.
Yeah, none of that shit. So we get in, of course. Her boyfriend gets us in, no problem. And a couple of the guys were coming through like the main bar, and then we got into like the room where there was going to be, which also had a stage, the party or whatever. And so we're just having drinks and we're talking to people, and I don't even remember what was going on. And all of a sudden a fist fight broke out. And apparently the band was involved. Like it was a whole thing. I don't think they started it, but it was a total mess. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm out of here. And we took off. So I never got to meet him. So I missed my moment.
Oh, man.
But back to the album. Britt, what do you think of this album?
I love both of these albums, but I think if I had to take one to a desert island, I would go with the self-titled album just because it's just continuous hit. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I love this one. I think when you have another album come out and it's a different sound from your initial album, I think it's, accepted if you go a little heavier and you're a little more badass. But if they had gone the other way, I think it would have been less accepted. If they were more poppy and more cheesy, I think it would have been like, oh, they sold out, blah, blah, blah. And the true fans would just have left them. So I think even though they changed styles a little bit, I think it was right for the time. And I think it was the right move, for their fans, because it's still, you can still drive a car to it. You can still play it at parties. You could still, but it's a little bit deeper. Lyrically and also musically. I think, like you said, they grew and they developed more. They were used to playing together more, knew they could do more with it. So I really like them both. I love the ballads on this album. I love Quicksand Jesus and In a Darkened Room. I think they're awesome. Yeah, and I agree with you, Ed. Monkey Business and Slave to the Grinder. Like, you can't deny those songs. They're awesome. So I don't know. I really love both albums, but I got to go with the self-titled.
Okay.
Matthew?
I love what you said, Sailor, about that you feel like there should be more progression between these two albums. Like there should be another album slotted somewhere in between self-titled and this one. And I think that's just the fact that they were sort of straddling two different paradigm shifts. We talked so much about the 80s going into the 90s and how things were changing, and all the bands we've talked about that changed their sound and matured and grew. Like if self-titled was released even a year later, would it be as popular as it was being released in 89? We don't know. It's all hindsight, right? But this is a very interesting album. It is heavy, which I like. And I think Sebastian does have some progression as far as his vocals go and his writing go. They were certainly going for a darker, more serious motif, if you will. And that's a quick jump from sort of the themes and the sound of the first album. But I think it has to do with the time. I mean, you're talking 2 years here, but so much had changed already. And you look at some of the albums that are released in 91, some really big heavy hitters that they had to go up against, even released later in the year. And to still go double platinum on this, I think is pretty amazing. I think it's pretty much off of the success of their first album and what they had carved out with that one. But to me, it's a pretty easy choice for me. I got to go with the self-titled album. I mean, it's just the hits are there, and I thoroughly enjoyed listening to it. Not that this is a great album too. It's different. It's very different. But it's the first album for me all day, every day.
Interesting. So I
Yeah.
totally agree with you, Matt, and we've discussed this several times on the show. This time period is a tough one. Anytime you have that bridge in between times in the world, I think albums can get caught in the middle of that. I mean, we had the fall of the Berlin Wall after their first album. We had a change in presidents. I mean, you know, we're beginning Desert Storm. You know, all of these things. I think that I think it's tough because could they have done another Skid Row? I think they could have. Did they need to? I don't know. Maybe this could have come out a year later. I think you need to progress, of course, as human beings and artists. I think often as listeners, we don't want bands to progress. I'm definitely in that camp. I want them to keep putting out the shit that I fell in love with, which is totally unfair, and I understand that. But there it is, So I'm going to have to agree with all of you, even though this is on its own, this is a fan-fucking-tastic album. But I have to go with self-titled also.
Wow, when's the last time we've had a unanimous agreement?
It's been a while. After the great Whitesnake debacle, which will forever go down in history. I don't even remember what we were arguing about anymore.
Oh, whether Whitesnake is hair metal or not.
Oh, right. And you were saying?
I say they're definitely hair metal.
And I disagreed. But there you have it.
But anyway.
So
I have to shout out real quick about Michael Wagner. There's in Nashville, if anybody listening to this is in Nashville, there is a jam, a Michael Wagner dedicated jam in the Basement East on May 30th that I'm playing. And it's like a bunch of people that have played on his records. And it's all songs from Wagner produced and engineered albums.
Oh, that's
wow.
awesome.
Amazing.
That's rad. I was going to ask you, what do you have coming up next?
So that's next. Our next show is at the end of the month in Nashville. We're doing a show called Creatures Fest with Vixen. It's like a convention. It's actually got an interesting lineup because it's got a lot of ex-Kiss members. It's got Peter Criss. It's got Ace Frehley, Vinnie Vincent, Bruce Kulick, all separately doing their own things. And then a bunch of other bands too. So that'll be interesting. And then, and that charity jam a couple of days later. And then we've got a very full June and July of tour dates in the States. And then hopefully fall, we've got some European dates coming up in the works. And the cruise, I don't know if this is announced, but I don't know if I'll say this or not, but fuck it. We're doing a cruise, which we've never done. We usually do Monsters of Rock all the time, which we're still doing, but we will be on the Kiss cruise this year too. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome.
And
I'm checking your website right now to see if it's on the website.
No, it's not actually. I just got it in a text, so I shouldn't have trouble.
Okay.
That's okay.
We can take it out if we need to. No worries. That's
And
easy
Britt,
to do.
Britt, I have
The
to
80s
ask.
cruise?
80s cruise is a different one we're doing.
Okay, that's next year.
We're all over this year.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh man, you guys are cruising.
There you go. And Britt, I have to ask you because I asked you the last time you were on, and you kind of teased it a little bit. But any new Vixen material anytime soon? You guys still working? Okay.
We are in the midst of recording a new single. I'm actually supposed to go in someday this week to lay my guitars down. So
Nice.
at least a new single is going to be
Awesome.
Awesome.
And it will be accompanied with a music video. So we're excited about that. And
Cool.
And then other than the Vixen days, we wrapped a really cool, I work for Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp as musical director and running some of the camps. And I wanted to do a women's only camp because all the camps are so heavily, male populated. And I was like, more women would come, I think, if we said it was only women. And it was so true. And we had a sold out camp and it was amazing. We had Melissa Etheridge, Nancy Wilson of Heart, Orianthe, and Kathy Valentine of the Go-Go's. And it was totally amazing. So Sailor, I wish you got to come to the next one we have in Florida for sure.
Oh, I would love to. I saw that picture.
You should be part of the next one. We should actually talk about this.
Oh, that would be amazing. I would absolutely love that. That would be really cool. Yeah.
Oh, I want to congratulate you on just being in the same photo with Nancy Wilson. Oh my gosh, I saw your photo. One of my idols. Oh my gosh, she is
Me too.
amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, Britt, Britt got to meet Nancy Wilson. I was so
Oh
jealous.
man, she was so nice. I get to spend like the whole day with her. It was incredible.
Oh, that's so
like,
cool.
She
Yeah,
is such a
15-year-old
badass.
she's amazing. She is
She's
amazing.
so cool. She's one of those people that I saw her walk by me in a casino once, and she just looked exactly like I expected. Like, what is it? What's the line in oh, this is happening to me again tonight. Son of a bitch. True Romance. When she's like, "You're so cool," their cigarette. That's literally what I wanted to do when I saw her walk by.
She
She
truly
just has that
is.
air about her.
She is so cool. She is so cool. Yeah.
I love it. And folks, if you did not already pick up the latest issue of American Whiskey Magazine, I will find out. My girl right here has got a spread in the magazine, that is. And
Yes.
that was so fun. My editor was so fucking thrilled. And I said, okay, we got to have her come back again, because I do this thing where we try to talk about, we still don't even know how to explain it and what to call it, but there's a piece at the end of the magazine with Nicole Austin from George Dickel, and we talk about cocktails, and we're trying to talk to, like, people who, what's the math behind a cocktail, basically. Is there math behind a cocktail, like, or deciding what cocktail you give to a certain person? So we'll have to have you do that next.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you for having me on that. I love that article. I know a lot of people that I know bought it and subscribed to the magazine now. So hopefully, that was
Awesome.
fun. Thank you for that.
Awesome. The photos they chose were great too. What they chose, one of my favorite photos of you for it. So I was really happy with how it came out. It was really cool.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. Love it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. And I'm looking at your dates here, and my husband and I are going to be doing a little traveling finally in July. So maybe we'll be near each other at some point. But do let me know next time you're in Florida, and I'll do whatever it takes. I will drive, I will walk, I will fly. I'll ride a bike.
Absolutely. That'd be fun. Same goes for you guys.
All right. Well, guys, get us out of here.
All right. Well, thank you as always for tuning in, listening. Thank you, Britt. As always great to have you on. Such a pleasure. And hopefully everyone enjoyed the show, and tune in next time. You can find us on Instagram at Metal Rock Whiskey, on Twitter at Metal Whiskey. You can find me right down here, right there, at Iconic Dad 24/7 on Instagram.
R.I.P. Whiskey Obsessor.
R.I.P. Whiskey Obsessor. Yeah, it's time for a change. Change is good. Sailor.
Oh, me. I'm Sailor Guevara. You can find me all over the internets, doing the things and the stuff. And subscribe to American Whiskey Magazine, please, so they keep paying me to write about shit, which is super fun. And I do a lot of stuff that you can find out on my websites. And if you're in the Treasure Coast of Florida, you can come by my bar now called the Mermaid Bar. Britt, what about you? Where can they find you?
Okay, you can find me at Britt Lightning on Instagram, and that's pretty much the only one I use. So just stick with that. And dates at BrittLightning.com or VixenOfficial.com. Don't just type in Vixen.com, because that will take you straight to an awesome porn site. But you want the VixenOfficial.com. And if you want to find out more about Rock Camp, you can go to rockcamp.com.
Yes,
right.
Please go find out more about Rock Camp, you guys. Truly, I expect you all to go right now while you're listening. Clickety clack, and then there will be a test next week.
I love it.
Okay, and like Britt said, I can also be found on Instagram as well. And unlike her, I think probably the reason you can only find me on Instagram is that's all they have the attention span for, is one social media. So that's at Bourbon Geek. I didn't mention that. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Metal Rock and Whiskey, and we will see you again on the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. And
see you.
fuck you, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.